Somewhere under your city, right now, there is a hole. Not a small hole, not a crack, a cavern. Maybe the size of a football stadium, maybe bigger. It was carved out by a mining company decades ago. The company might not even exist anymore. The maps of exactly where that cavern ends and where it begins, those maps might be incomplete, might be outdated, might be sitting in a filing cabinet that nobody has opened since 1987. You drive over it every morning on your way to work. You have no idea it is there. This is not a hypothetical. This is Louisiana. And in 1980, one of those caverns swallowed an entire lake in 3 hours. Took 11 barges with it, took a drilling platform, took trees, tractors, and sections of shoreline, reversed the flow of a canal connected to the Gulf of Mexico, created a waterfall 100 feet tall where there had never been a waterfall before. And Texaco, the company that caused it, paid almost nothing. That last part is what nobody talks about. To understand what happened, you need to understand what is underneath Louisiana. Not just dirt, not just rock. Beneath the surface of this state sits one of the most valuable geological formations on the planet. Salt domes. Massive underground columns of salt pushed upward over millions of years by geological pressure. Some of them are taller than the Burj Khalifa, some wider than Manhattan, and they are everywhere under southern Louisiana. For over a century, American companies have been hollowing these domes out. You drill in, you dissolve the salt with water, you pump it out, and you are left with a perfectly sealed underground cavern. These caverns do not leak, they do not corrode, they are geologically stable, which makes them extraordinarily valuable for one specific purpose: storage. The United States government stores its entire strategic petroleum reserve inside salt domes. 700 million barrels of crude oil sitting in underground chambers beneath Louisiana and Texas. Enough oil to supply the entire country for over a month if every import stopped tomorrow. This is the backup plan for America's energy supply, and it is sitting in holes carved out of underground salt columns beneath ordinary American towns. Private companies figured out the same thing. If you have a salt dome on your property, you have a natural storage tank worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You lease the cavern space to oil companies, gas companies, chemical companies. You collect rent on an underground room that costs almost nothing to maintain. It is the most valuable real estate in America, and it is completely invisible. This is the business that was operating under Lake Peigneur in 1980. A company called Diamond Crystal had been mining salt there for decades. Real mining, tunnels, shafts, workers going underground every day. The operation was profitable, established, and by all accounts, well run. The mine stretched out beneath the lake bed in multiple directions. An underground network of white crystalline corridors that the workers knew like the hallways of their own homes. Above them, the lake. 11 feet deep on average. Quiet. Locals fished there on weekends. And then Texaco arrived. Texaco had drilling rights on the lake. They believed there was an oil deposit below the lake bed. They had done their calculations. They were confident the drill path would miss the mine below by a safe margin. In the oil business, this kind of calculation happens thousands of times a year. Most of the time, it is correct. The margins are thin but acceptable. You drill, you find your oil, you pump, you profit. On November 20th, 1980, the calculation was wrong by 64 meters. When the Texaco drill bit broke through the roof of the Diamond Crystal mine, the hole it created was small, about the size of a dinner plate. But what came next is a physics lesson that cannot be stopped once it starts. Salt dissolves in water. The lake water poured into the tunnel and immediately began eating the walls. The hole got larger. More water poured through. More salt dissolved. The hole got larger still. This is a feedback loop. Every second it ran, it accelerated. Within minutes, the hole was the size of a car. Within an hour, it was the size of a house. The drilling crew felt the rig tilt. They had 90 seconds to evacuate. They made it. The mine had 55 workers inside. They had minutes. The tunnels were flooding at a speed nobody had ever designed an evacuation plan for. But decades earlier, some engineer whose name nobody remembers had made a decision. A boring, unglamorous, completely routine decision about where to place emergency exits and how to route escape shafts. That decision, made on an ordinary afternoon in an office somewhere, is the reason 55 people are alive today. Every single worker made it out. The last man climbed out with water at his ankles. What came next is the part that does not feel real. The entire lake drained in under 3 hours. 450 million gallons of water, gone. The suction created a vortex visible from the shore. 11 barges moored on the lake were pulled toward it one by one. Witnesses described them disappearing vertically, sucked straight down like toys in a bathtub. A tugboat followed. Then the Texaco drilling platform itself, a structure weighing thousands of tons, was pulled off its moorings and swallowed by the earth. The shoreline began collapsing inward. A greenhouse, a garden, a parking lot, full-grown trees, all of it sliding toward the vortex and disappearing. The ground did not crack dramatically. It simply slid away, quietly, into the hole. And then, when the lake was empty, something stranger happened. The Delcambre Canal connected Lake Penure to the Gulf of Mexico. For its entire existence, water had flowed from the lake outward toward the Gulf. But now there was a void where the lake had been, a crater, and the Gulf of Mexico began flowing backward into it. Salt water rushing inland through the canal, reversing a flow that had existed for as long as anyone could remember. Where the canal water poured into the crater, it fell over 100 feet. A waterfall that had never existed before was suddenly one of the tallest in Louisiana. It ran for 2 days. The barges that had been pulled under began resurfacing. The water pressure from the refilling crater pushed them back up. 9 of the 11 came back. They bobbed to the surface encrusted with salt, crushed and twisted, like they had been wrung out by something underground. 2 barges never came back up. They are still down there. Now here is where the story stops being about a lake and starts being about you. After the event, investigators tried to determine liability. Texaco admitted the error. The calculation had been wrong. The drill hit the mine. The math failed. In a just world, the company responsible for destroying a lake, a mine, 11 barges, and the livelihoods of everyone connected to the operation would face consequences proportional to the damage. The settlement that Texaco reached with Diamond Crystal and the various affected parties totaled around $44 million. Texaco's revenue that same year was over $50 billion. The fine was less than 0.1% of their annual revenue, the equivalent of someone earning $50,000 a year paying a $5 parking ticket for destroying their neighbor's house. The lake itself, nobody paid for that. It was transformed permanently from a freshwater lake to a saltwater one. The entire ecosystem changed. The fishing that locals had depended on for generations, gone. The property values around the lake collapsed. The state of Louisiana did not pursue Texaco for the environmental damage to the lake. The lake was simply reclassified and life moved on. This is the part of the story that the geology documentaries do not cover, because the geology is wild and dramatic and makes for good television. But the economics of what happened after is where the real story lives. The system that allowed Texaco to drill on a lake without precise knowledge of what was directly below it, that system is still operating. Right now, across Louisiana, across Texas, across the entire Gulf Coast, companies are drilling and mining and storing materials underground based on calculations that are good but not perfect, based on maps that are detailed but not complete, based on margins that are acceptable until they are not. The U.S. currently has 60 active strategic petroleum reserve caverns in Louisiana and Texas alone. Hundreds of additional private storage caverns leased to energy companies. The regulations governing how close you can drill to an existing cavern, how those distances are calculated, and who verifies the calculations, those regulations were tightened after Lake Penieur. But tightened is not the same as solved. In 2012, 30 years after Lake Penieur, a sinkhole opened near Assumption Parish in Louisiana. A storage cavern operated by a company called Texas Brine had collapsed. The sinkhole grew to over 300 feet wide. It released methane gas into the surrounding swamp. It forced the permanent evacuation of over 300 homes. The residents were paid to leave. Most of them took the money because they had no choice. Their neighborhood no longer exists. Texas Brine paid settlements. The amounts were not disclosed. The company continued operating. There's a pattern here. The underground economy of Louisiana, the salt domes, the storage caverns, the drilling rights, the mineral leases, generates billions of dollars every year for energy companies, for landowners, for the state government through tax revenue. It is an invisible economy running beneath an ordinary landscape, beneath houses, beneath lakes, beneath roads and schools and churches. The people who live above it, the fishermen who lost their lake in 1980, the families who lost their neighborhood in 2012, they are not shareholders in this economy. They are tenants living above it. And when the underground economy fails, the cost lands on them while the profits had already been collected by someone else. This is the invisible landlord of Louisiana. You cannot see it. It does not advertise. It does not appear on any map that a normal person would ever look at. But it owns the ground beneath a significant portion of American infrastructure, and it operates on the assumption that its calculations are correct. They are usually correct. Usually. The two barges at the bottom of Lake Penieur have been down there for over 40 years now. The lake above them is salt water. Dolphins have been spotted in it. The ecosystem that replaced the original one is thriving in its own way. If you visit today, it looks peaceful. It looks permanent. It looks like it has always been there. But permanence is not a geological fact. It is an assumption. The ground beneath you is not a floor. It is a negotiation between what humans have taken out of it and what it can afford to give. Louisiana has been on the losing side of that negotiation before, and the filing cabinet with the incomplete maps is still somewhere. In some office, in some building, above some cavern, whose exact boundaries nobody is completely certain of. The next drilling rig is already permitted. The calculation is probably correct.